measuring?
Wait, double check that. See where it might. Sure. Have fun at the D3 debates. I guess we're stronger than two Kansas people. Nice to see you, Jamie.
Hey, it's nice to meet you. Have fun.
Y'all don't have any stand, do you?
Yep. Yeah, we can.
Seconds. What's your email?
Daniel J.D. Taylor.
do it there. Anyone who's not ready? Awesome. Contention one is immigration, but the first scenario is repatriation. Rising healthcare costs and increased immigration makes repatriation unequal. Paying providers just keeps one or take these ones. Compensated cares approximate cost of medical repatriation. Alternative costs example to repatriation. Immigration medical repatriation is deportation by another name may increase the risk of death and deterioration of life changes in mind. LPI 12 immigration access and repatriation is a form of their political mindset while its vulnerability needed to expect to deter foreign bodies to penetrate the United States. Only a shift in study delivers treatment to disease and death can change these exclusions that cause bare life. Joe 815. There's much of the military industry management regulatory teaches the policies are established in the work of the language. The first one was radical affirmation of precariousness, welcoming non-citizens deconstructs the sovereign subject-white relationality of different precarity instead of sovereign groupings of communities and refusing the logic of securitization. Kelson 15 people exposed to precariousness differ. We must expose that what papers will suffer some examples. It's themselves will with their company, their substance themselves. We're in some understanding one of these what countries we were ready to look for the world, so that you can find discuss any relationship to us. Since the background with Western countries should critically target our exclusive territory, we erect ourselves from this question control designed to borders. That's not something necessary to West country consolidated with my refugees established. With the nation and fighting against the seven shared identity with Spain. This was human critical to political engagement, solidarity, paying president, its rules, solidarity with the that is the equality of the return equal to political. So like I'm social greatest big and small. With behaviors on cultural creating through research, structures, public creating, access to sacred versus fighting for fair security. And also this rejection will have to fear dangerous of this. Discourse virtues disciplinary power with their state of permanent government necessitating control. Like country to the military police, which discourse of others cultivate while the other. Abuses of pride will not feel benefit from citizens we care about refugees, but it's in the terms excellent. Additional level experience for creating collection networks of solidarity market, networks of solidarity. The second zero is institutional failure. U.S. healthcare is a permanently failing institution with habitual ambivalence towards unequal life chances. The impact is 100,000 deaths a year, disproportionately concentrated among undocumented immigrants and poorly coordinated cares key like 12. Right, well, care is the unit insurance, especially not the use of coordinate care abilities, etc. Preventable to reduce influential without avoidable deaths. The research amendments, demonstration abilities can really equal sales immigrants. How much we want small losing number of church elderly because we 5% work personal 2%. Expenditure patients with problems which was patients not being all insured and get only a small portion. With this thing you remind about the church for more than it was on medical attention. Not really was important and able to say the issues of institutional failures and absolute natural the church can move on what it is. Therefore, you have the service with commercial management some sort of problem with politics and health situations not because you start paying county documents also just taking medical. Mr. Cannot qualify in conventional risk calculus and ability to prioritize immigrants causes zero healthcare policy failure. He must apply conventional large magnitude risk calculus to prioritize immigrants in order to have effective cost-benefit analysis. Matthew and 10. Social categorization theories, providence of legal orders of political basis of calculus, making magnitude is discrimination, and FBO centers of which are being used for independence, rewards, alternative by sending out these individual expenditures groups, but no the public could also center treat groups in which churches here to go around by share resources, right? Sometimes immigrants are largely tax rates, which more and tax with helping the wage flow, spend on permanent social services, for every care these rates of more mortality, skills, concept of care, for all taxpayers who receive what critical systems in the term population going, everybody who for ethics and person high benefits available, income represent privileging, infinite magnitude, indicates probability, source, ethical decision making, can start, and a first approaches, and respect the probability, potential for social dramatic attacks, and marginalization probabilities of first approaches, affinity, risk, the rational reason, logical texturities, serving the situation of logical self-affirming, the spatial temporal characteristics, and rationality decisions, or make threats, something that responsible to fight security, something cramped, and attack wild cards, and use reaching interest on the transformation of our base, the towards capability based on its whether it's our capable of certain mechanical concerning, but she has potential as a couple of its quite possible, but the potential of these residual precious possibilities, is that the John of rifles and the present regular down by the administration presenting, the commercial forward probably get lost connection where I get terrorist network, and insurances, case of national measures like the next no cost coordination for immigrants into, exceeding the hospitals that cost stigma deportation, marriage, 15. Messages based on social media, taking notes, health safety nets, not only insurance software that's like healthcare facilitations and only for residential tools, public insurance, access to the quality of private increase by hard means insurance and what they get agency coverage, especially if they look Latino fear healthcare services due to possible surveillance reports, which speak to the reported decrease to healthcare access, police, good kilos to driving when he sees the police agents run, and goes to home which is rationally doing mitigants, he's doing anything, and optionally universal public insurance system reduces undocumented immigrants' deaths and improves health outcomes will work, and 11 realistic solution would create more inclusive cases of medical small changes to improve overall health immigrants will just locate the next healthcare system. So health policies are unique, extremely medical things, small variation workers in the United States, which is a version of immigrants apply healthcare was a complex system reached by small private insurance. Universal health insurance program those going for private insurance to receive healthcare. This was a public system with about 50 million Mexican along with our police of insurance. 40 million uninsured Mexican receive accessible health. Coverage police provide Mexican with the social prevention for those basic treatments, most health they create based on income first. 20% against healthcare expenditures to cover programs reduce tuberculosis, contract to ensure mortality to 13 nation. No little policy that would short-based optional universal healthcare coverage. That's the plan. The United States federal government should establish an optional public insurance plan without respect to citizenship in the United States. Contention 2 is solvency. Universal healthcare extended to non-citizens improves health outcomes, saves the safety net, and reduces costs to my moral obligation to provide access. Count 17. And with countries keeping national sentiment, these for expanding healthcare non-citizens only a moral obligation. There is a moral obligation for individuals with healthcare that express which reveals single serve moral relevant differences of healthcare. And social terms ought to be distributed based on healthy government benefits when we support health. Healthy people in poor countries have been negated by the activities of rich countries. Activities of people in low countries are responsible for healthy global for providing equal coverage for non-citizens by seeing by financial strain immigrants or healthy non-citizens that use good healthcare resources. Criminal illnesses and overcrowding so to treat on the paper. Care when insured immigrants even with the cost of greater moral obligation for equal access still persists. A refusal to serve evil for any utilitarian calculation wants in a necro economy. No status quo point on Spice 11. Programs of looked at as international relations, warranty, human rights, exemption, not just sort of role with state and state part in necro economy, which shows destructive measures are weighing utilitarian nationalists are evil, representative and assassination, killing, torture, attribute disability, which human rights tolerated as well as evil, even according to economy laws against less evil, risk, picking up counterproductive measures are tolerating things of the great evil may be reached cumulatively and preventing discrimination and legal tax prevents for federal restriction on healthcare for attack low skill risk. 13. Ability access healthcare should be known to vital health and triggering good regulations and benefits by legal rights screening should be utilized regulations many medical benefits should be WRA should be revised regulations without withstanding screening policies to cause discrimination with the immigrants for healthcare purposes should be adopted and surveillance is a pervasive in public health, but case takeouts are theoretical and alarmist. They must prove overwhelming contextualized evidence of the negative effects of public insurance to win the debate clear at all 17. We have many citizen issues, public health surveillance frameworks are dealing with ethical issues, awareness of the whole spectrum of issues that we want to raise because of public health surveillance with theoretical orders and stigmatization risk, but difficulty in stigmatization with theoretical possibility, but we discuss how no one said which disease stigmatization are actually experienced. Critical literature is not identity to get the normative documents which authors are humans are also empirical premises and regardless of state of abstract all received in the broad conditions already outlined. It's not meant to say benefits of surveillance to be considerable. Practitioners need to know what constitute a considerable benefit is. It's motivated to improve public practice not sharing with the context specific analysis already. Example cases of practitioners will inevitably have to address and public insurance increases healthcare quality and sustains the social safety net hacker and some extending insurance all known elderly Americans of low insurance but to move money could have afforded low considering the quality of care and employees for choosing financing reasonable share the cost that is a money key for choose of the universal medical like program social insurance. No, the major financial work should be pulled in as widely as possible for research more healthy and segregate the large multitude of receiving insurance will never work for lower risk capital and administrative efficiencies used as pressure through disparity improvements in the quality of the cost effectiveness of medical care. Medicare's middle promise and the agency will not require abandoning Medicare does it requires attending the model of the secure workplace coverage allow to work virtually and hold down costs.
Good.
Yeah.
You read this Wolverine 11 evidence about Mexico's healthcare system. Mexico ranks behind the United States in terms of health outcomes. It has a two-tier system where rich people oftentimes have better care and access. There are multiple individuals within Mexico, millions of individuals really, in Mexico that don't have insurance because they are poor. Why is the model of Mexico something that is good or sufficient?
That kind of like assumes that Mexico is like a rich country of the global north. Like we think that their insurance system still has universal health coverage, dramatically reduced malaria rates of other people with chronic diseases. They've done astounding stuff.
I'm asking how it increases quality of care.
Like
poor individuals in Mexico are uninsured or have poor health care.
That doesn't negate the idea that we should have universal public insurance that's offerable. We're not saying we adopt the entire public health system.
I get that.
But you're also looking at problems that are endemic to being a developing country.
If the app gives people bad health care, how is it a form of ethical decision making?
A, where I answered just above, all of the questions before that assume Mexico, which has endemic problems that are not similar to the United States. B, we indicate the way we discuss health policy or visions for reforming health policy should be centered around non-citizens.
Okay, that didn't answer my question, but the Light and 12 evidence says that there are 100,000 preventable deaths that happen in the healthcare system. It then has a line about how immigration policy is the cause of some of these. Being that the app doesn't solve immigration policy, how many preventable deaths do you actually solve?
We think A, for uninsured and underinsured people, we think the plan helps. I mean, I don't have like a specific count of what it looks like post-plan. We also think that things like medical repatriation, where private hospitals just report immigrants when they go to the hospital, we solve that.
So, yeah, I have a question about the repatriation stuff. Sure. The plan offers insurance regardless of citizenship. How does the plan stop racist doctors, individuals who don't think that they should treat undocumented immigrants within the United States from reporting their citizenship status?
The plan repeals the PRWRA, which requires
Whoa. Where?
Gilbert's 13 evidence and the plan text. Without respect to citizenship, we think that would look like repealing the PWRA, which means things like immigration status and social security numbers not be reported. B, we think that.
So everyone in the United States no longer has to report their social security number
we think that's what the plan
to the hospital or their citizenship status? When you go to the doctor to receive health care, in order to give them your insurance policy, part of it is to give them your social security number. This doesn't make any sense to me.
Our evidence says that it's a barrier to non-citizens getting health care, and that is something that would probably be repealed, like that part of the act would be repealed in order to get non-citizens health care.
You said the Gilchrist evidence says this?
It says that's an impediment to getting health care. That should be illegal if we conclude that's a bad idea.
Okay. And your interpretation is that the plan to offer a public option does this?
Yes, we think we will repeal part of the PRWA that prevents people from getting health care because that is an impediment.
We're just going to be 6 and then the advantage.
First off, the 50 states and relevant territories should establish a public health insurance option and accuracy combat to improve any intergovernmental coordination fields relevant to the prevention policy, interstate combat law, uniform coordinated action policy, Jackal 17 Molly, state health complex in Nigeria, United Nations One Gender California Research Population, they join the compact to agree companies to the same dispute types of enrollment forward in part companies, electricity laws before they be so create new systems national Jackal complex, one international agencies, combat with minor complex before gender engagement will make it to regulate and agreement law against approvals and support the congressional approval is then the necessary Congress system seems to be dangerously liquid not just part of the teachers say health exchanges could be offered lawmakers instead of holding GOC congressional approval need that's not the and then China has to be compulsory public options are only voluntary immigrant in 91D and then China has the government creates a public health insurance assistance required to join the NCHI programs are compulsory not voluntary voting issue first predictable limits and less voluntary programs cover sector of population package of services that the second is currently make all strategic conditions on all the strategies conditional on consumers only say that they give grand offense to general public increases enrollment next off is midterms and when they send simple majority now but Trump's low approval speed Larson and Stephen 17 judges when the Alabama expected offended and expected to give the private 1% as significant momentum Trump's approval rating was a significant hollows rating ranked in the medical workers thinking that's requirements to pull analysis to compare races that they pulling approval rating some party target listed Trump's low approval cost under Republicans 52 deaths 48 Republicans Trump's low approval had the historical evidence mounting constantly because the Senate look at the Republicans lost the re-election seat where Trump was lower than 50% of approval rating Nevada, Arizona, Nebraska, botch repeal and replace elections repeal and replace guarantees that GOP will lose the Senate now the plan is Trump said there the God's blessing 17 supporting the repeal when they were just senators to women's healthcare is important issue sending midterm to whether to Jackson senator to repeal when it's re-elected senator who supports healthcare less likely to vote to repeal a re-elected senator who supports healthcare repeal when Congress development the states one they want the senators to fix the AC rather than repeal judicial appointments to keep the war mean right under 17 the executive that can be fleeing so Trump County links even more during the courts the senate that bring court challenges to the grounds to determine whether action taken by the Obama that Trump are legally Trump's rulemaking result by DC Circuit Courts law kind of lawsuits are across the country that be offered by Trump appointees in country countries suing all the companies the kids are suing the Fed over expected with more litigation instruction. Now, the effects of appointments to limit DC circuits tremendously influence still favors contamination, warming causes human driven, human species are extinguishing, human beings are extinguishing rate their parts, since anything in the fossil market may plus it be dissatisfaction, conservation extinction appears to have scientists who believe that human extinction will happen in the near term, when we take this become extinction in 100 years, scientists predict the extinction from flying from prospect and religious life, so lead to the demise of all life on Earth, only hope is mass production, CO2 emissions, next off is the advanced counterfeiting, tax united program, should prohibit medical repatriation, only advanced hospital. Have a ton of other avenues to conduct medical repatriation, and YLPI and 12. Medical repatriation, which should be curbed restricting hospital ability to seek reimbursement in the public, of course, existing protections of regulatory reform, consistent with the federal government, straight the private hospitals, engage in medical repatriation, a little bit over the site. Next up is the Farm and the plan undermines high farm and U.S. Innovation Act and 16 the medical and innovation center. Take off the use as a forefront by American biotech test investors, commercial women, and price controls are permitted investors to partner developing drugs expensively. There are countries, free ride countries, and plus price control increasing the average. The revenues from reinvestment drug prices will flow with innovation with something because that's to produce a fewer compounds. Exists a high degree of correlation between revenues from the Europeans from low profitability to price controls and cause them to invest less for already U.S. innovation fields. China runs this power around Hong Kong. 15 U.S. most of the form of the invented by counting their critical power of U.S. superpower sets from in China was a result of manufacturing Chinese power farm despite the sense exports virtually and the from innovative products. China has become the world second highest investor by continuing to cut U.S. resources. China sourcing the virtue of the application of U.S. the nuclear causes nuclear warehouse and several cases in which the nation's rise is from right down the six. This is the World War the most spaces of effort to find here without wars of one great price. China is bringing the question of PCG and Trump have fired up national support the more important than the draw social factors which are manageable, which are manageable if that's escalate the trends in transforming formidable competition to stop Chinese HICD as every stupid trend has easy develop scenarios which the words consequence of nuclear adventure next off to see economy DA is Goldilocks now all fundamental indicators is just gradual rate normalization frame and L322 the reluctance to raise forecast war interest rates of the significant change in the inflation expectation investors that Goldilocks environment war is over actual proof on funded risk as well the market selected to likely to reach an all-time high. So you mentioned one doesn't think that these stability funding those north south past fundamentals showing new spending is inflation everyone 17 bonds so still so stuff fiscal concerns and redemption more spending the consensus really of the national response to fiscal stimulus and heavy rates while the we're going to borrow the high interest rates with the switching come up as markets is really federal spending will do boost that right to the unexpectedly cost inflation causes monetary overcorrection which helps the economy and we draw an ACP fear that inflation will get too hot force in the pension step which dramatic operated interest will derive to market the economy pension work losing 2% on the possible sequence which makes the current pension is a good chance to sink library. Pension staying higher, the economy goes into those 15 days of trades for teaching during pension lead to where they increase states are risking military conflict if fear of their decline, if the age boards and the company supports being comparatively free to be true. Like nuclear arms danger, shipping out their property groceries, not sure to be changing the world economy, nationals, emotions could have unforeseen consequences from Armageddon case. Consequential and consequential and conversizing to the period of the intentions to ensure the achievement of the the real world violence and injustice, where moral purity is complicit in justice, violence, and positive actions and effects rather than motivations. The most significant data that pursue one goal is here, and equally important to be effective to pursuing goals and judging effects and pragmatic ways and more absolutely inhibit structure with the optimized political opportunities to evade political responsibility. There's no end to our ethics. All theory inevitably devolves into consequentialism, the door and temp. Moralities are reducing suffering, increasing even larger consequential plus that we give the right way consequences believe in action. People believe that the non-consequential ways of the ways of approaching morality there are on the scratch the surface from the ontology to consequential way and waiting to the categorical compare that only qualifies as rational standard of morality, given the assumption that it will be generally beneficial. I realize that most of the states kind of context this.
Yeah.
Okay. Social sciences rely on contain 90 fundamental laws in economics are looking for roughly saying the biological science laws of market behavior growth early developed and here evidence making this require explanation described earlier the biology bioecology of our primary field that the primary fishing social laws looking for produce and seeking the large rising other question the social sciences looking for theory for false presumption consistency progress of social science through historic consumption providing insurance by respect to citizenship with elevated information disclosure requirements, which means that you cannot deny people insurance on the basis of their citizenship status, but the government could still ask for citizenship status. And Trump will use the plan that way. They have explicitly prohibited it in the plan text. Go back to the states counter plan. The 50 states and relevant territories should establish an optional public health insurance with respect to citizens and enacting interstate compact to prevent air traffic coordination fields relevant to the aforementioned policies. In fact, to case immigrants won't use the plan, takes out both advantages. Elaine 17, Trump is discouraging immigrants to seeking medical care efforts and immigration failed to break this even Vanessa medical treatment. Just to ensure President immigrants are facing refuse answer phone calls from the frequent patients with former bias or concerns of attracting their medical services supposed to be sections for their workers from families wanting to disenroll because they enroll the one who part is dead. They start getting undocumented immigrants are fit to sign for health insurance and live in families undocumented doesn't increase coverage. Having 17 million public options kind of this is no large majority of the nation global and public tuition for that 28.6 million U.S. residents who are unsure answer nothing the public option but the public option got to access for the ability to private insurance places and benefits United Insurance. Insurance of public at the exchange public healthcare costs undergone the insurance particularly employment would force insurance would force insurance and cost providers to be forced out of the market. They have enough to government insurance have to eat the losses the public option would face the compression the insurance from public option something to really consumers want to see the benefits from the hunting government. Think of the television nothing to make care more affordable or accessible extremely low cost sharing is sufficient to deter use of care proves the app doesn't really care about immigrants. TIGA and some key research from 65 period focus on different sharing effects of use of care even small cost sharing $1 to $5 systems to reduce use of care. The public option is on 60 multiple limits care cost cards out private insurance book in 16 there's no way the public option can be sustainable and fund document that couple with the following reasons because we could have this the program money continues to available to all consumers want affordable prices. The public option operates flexible entities subject to risk or go with this range of the public option operates under the principle to require as was in for the keep premiums affordable running perpetual lessee public option will use less making more ability to lower premiums after raise insurance the insurance out the option with it. An option will be only pressure to contain tax price subsidies lead to rushing with higher price points to accessible to wealthy. The public option is a national code of fair. Ready?
Topicality, why does compulsory, I guess I'm confused, is like a voluntary sign up lead to sort of subsection coverage affirmatives?
Yeah, you could read unique evidence about who's likely to sign up, and then you could say this.
That's a question solved in topicality.
Well, no, it's a question of topicality to everyone describing the way those plans would be.
If the plan is guaranteed to everyone in the United States, I'm curious as
You
to
can
why
have a
that leads to a
voluntary-
subsection.
Yeah, so you can have a voluntary insurance option that not many people sign up for. The resolution doesn't say comprehensive, it doesn't say universal, it doesn't indicate that everyone in the United States has to do it. It is possible for you to say 10 people sign up for the plan. I don't know how we get links to VAs or anything like that.
Right, but it's
Which
a
allows
question
you
of
to have
modern definitions of
subsections.
NHI and how individual teams defend that. I'm curious as to why compulsory.
Well, you haven't read through C yet.
How do sort of the GOP takes control of the narrative from the passage of the plan?
Right, so
does it without respect to citizenship, which conservatives have bitterly opposed.
Well, we disagree. Republicans often court immigrants as strategies.
Not just immigrants, undocumented people.
Yeah,
they do.
They-
What's none of your evidence
People
isn't
in the
even in the
United
context of
States
that. It's just in the
have
context of the failure to repeal the ACA. Like, why is this evidence about the
So there's sort of two links going on here. The one we've already read is the one about how expanding healthcare disrupts the narratives that Democrats are using to win Senate elections now, where Republicans are able to disrupt the coherence of that story. They can't campaign on Republicans wanted to take away your healthcare if Republicans gave everyone healthcare.
Doesn't answer my question, but all right. The innovative pharma dissent. Your internal link evidence indicates that China will get ahead in innovation capacity, but this is in the context of their entire manufacturing sector and uses pharma as an example. What about all of the other manufacturing sectors that they're ahead on, like communication technology, military, or like the entire sector? Well, like, why is pharma? Your evidence doesn't say pharma is key to that.
Yeah, it says that lots of innovative products are derived from China's pharmaceutical sector.
No,
so
it says
pharma is the most important.
growth in China was largely a result of their manufacturing capacity to create Chinese pharmaceuticals. But like, why? That's not the internal link for why that the U.S. will be able to outstrip them.
It says take Chinese pharmaceuticals and describe
again.
This is
Econ. The uniqueness question. You said it says worries over trade wars proved unfounded. Why?
So our evidence indicates that there's a low probability of escalation for the trade disputes. Well, so one of the reasons is when Trump enacts these tariffs, he always hollows them out by carving out massive exceptions, exempting certain kinds of goods. It's more like
which ones?
Political
campaign, whether where the exception.
Oh,
or
like
he
China
just
did.
put on.
Yeah, he exempted like 7 different countries in the steel.
Sure, but like, what about major actors like China, which is great power, which is what's your impact on this in the context?
Yeah, this evidence was written after the China steel tariffs were announced and said that there's a
Yes,
low probability of
China
trade
responded to
escalation,
this.
and it's a low probability of affecting the economy.
Sure.
Yep. should be set. Everyone good for an order? Okay, so orderly case, topicality, state's counterclaim, let's go topicality, repatriation counterclaim, state's counterclaim, Senate, dissad, the Senate election dissad, inflation dissad, innovation dissad. There's not a header for some reason we need to look out under over repatriation. It's in that T. It's for some reason meshed in that T block. If you want to just type that in. No consequentials for two reasons. First, if you have an ethical rationality that should prioritize. Two, there's the question of questioning your ties to the land and to the sovereign, to the state sovereign services that it provides, because it's built on the dispossession of undocumented folks to justify U.S. global capitalist and imperialism abroad. Even if they win, consequential is good. Your consequential should prioritize only consequences that affect undocumented folks for the reason that listed above. They say that all views consequential is not wrong. Your evidence doesn't have more imperative, not the affirmative, which is so it's strictly a question about having true ethical relations to others. You are just calculation, but calculation is not ethics itself. Ethics comes first, because it's the only way to be better people than both around and going out of round, because we have a subject formation argument about if we have better ethics, even if we win the dissad, it's a question of subject formation, which you make us calculating bastards, which you should reject. They say social science is real. You're not social science. All of your internal link chains with multiple internal links, multiplied by each other, something that would never be defended in academia, which means that although this is offensively affirmative, we have a one-to-one connection between the act and the dissad, but they do not, which means that you're not true social scientific researchers in the government. We'll still ask, no, the Gilchrist evidence says that we solved this because it would be seen as an impediment to undocumented people getting access to health insurance or health care, which means that would be stripped away. They say that there's no, they won't use the plan, they use it right now, they disproportionately use the ER because they never left to go when they get sick. The app stops that and allows them from preventive care, which means that stops the worst instances of dying from health care or having bad health, but the ban on citizenship requirements that reforms solves this argument, also shows that it reduces the stigma. It's inevitable. You're a paternalist. You shouldn't reject the app even if people don't use it, because they should still have the option, because healthcare is essential to human flourishing. They say that we don't increase coverage. I'm going to group all of this argument as long as the next three arguments. They say that public option will private insurance. That means that when it comes to single payer, which your Gaffney card evidence, it says it's good. It says that it guts competition. No reason the competition is good. Your guts access card assumes that it's good to have costs on healthcare to buy it. We don't care when it comes free at the point of service, which is the Wolbert evidence. They say that low cost sharing argument says that we pay completely by taxes on the richest through the taxation. The last argument says that it's crowd out solves, but their evidence says that that crowding out means that there's lower costs, which is there's no link to the inflation stimulus dissad, because to the inflation/stimulus dissad, because because it effectively would mean that there would be low prices for that we would have to pay, because it would be we'd have a monopoly sold by topicality. We have compulsory progressive taxation on rich people. Now the counter-tradition is that we have to guarantee free care to all residents. But remember, in 12. NHN is guaranteed health insurance for all the nation's residents, referred to as universal government focus of all traditional intentions concerning defiance, universal coverage. Their interpretation overloads means that there's one app, health insurance solves all the ground plans, and it's key to have flexibility to try to scale tops and find mechanism debate. Chain 3, there's not a detailed single payer bill, other such applications, such as the lack of these policy network supports single payer management dictates rest of the business journey and policy proposal for legislators, especially healthcare, following stuff from the Democratic Party, second Democratic ground, a little supply, so costs lower farmer prices, new federal program, reasonability, stop traditional
obviously the evidence helps them try out repatriation counterpoint. They say they banned it, but the counterpoint helps not only epistemic relationality and framing arguments about the case. The counterpoint is immigrants, migrants, but doesn't challenge core tenets of sovereignty and capitalism. The counterpoint lives libertarian utopia as privateers, which kills hundreds of thousands of people every year, which is the counterpoint vote has to take back global commons as well. Toronto 17. Recently, nationals are getting around police convince law working class their laws complex immigrants and not by neoliberal approach to the welfare state. Radical left approach requires for minor health and policy non-liberal inclusiveness and unrepair slavery, minor selection, non-reward, structural and economic performance, program imperialism, the difference between the charitable and international political model system, versus class holiday, that class locals move, and then newly with education against it, etc. Radical approach to foster transracial society for capitalist capitalism, exploitation and racism, oppressive approaches to single ethics, and trying to ensure a habitable plan for all. Compare for all now the kind of permutation do both. The campaign looks to the benefits, such because all the immigration stuff and the econ stuff, because immigrants are very popular and they may be costly. And they're also key to, and they might destroy immigration. Counterplan, interpretation of negative knowledge, the evolutionary insurance policy in the states, not uniform implementation of policy through compact states, rigs, power process status, states destroy domestic political topics as comparative literature of the federal, the uniform states action doesn't exist. The impact of bad topics race the margin talk that's all power trade, which first top education about healthcare. Uniform 50 states literature doesn't exist in counterpoint. Without Patrick Love, democracy versus one size fit all federal action campus versus literature base, which ruins federalism education. It also criticizes KO's strategy in terms of external lingus, in terms of self-kills uniform state too. Reject the team to deterrent for success present from top states and states rigs when it's the advantage rating. Now they don't solve the states don't solve the app because there's going to be federal preemption. There's going to be federal preemption, especially with Donald Trump being on the top. There's still going to be they can't do a repeal the PR repeal or choose repatriation is inevitable. Inevitable. Yeah, let's go to the second. The election decided you should ignore the political students of the dissent. You don't have your hands on the letter of power to reach co-option by Trump doesn't matter, but the radicality critique is a prior question. Especially when relationality comes first and implementation doesn't matter. Round 5. Originally, both sides sense the political candidates are civility critiques take to be the MGH, critical theory, such as our concept considered senses of time to go to critical critique and timely. It's crucial to keep tactical and independent presence conservative and timeless support intellectual strategy for meeting differences in the so when council can learn how my country and self violations of return to dark, what can be more important. You can't predict the essence of NDT. Republicans a lot more money than co-builders 400 million this is more than 2016. This sort of programs and comments for purchase or distributing his movement and analysis maps Wisconsin Texas Michigan North Carolina the impact of election comes out to voters hard committee session when midterm 30% drop off and turn out their option from the GOP. People who turn out to be 70 older, whiter people who are married and Trump popularity. Plan is unpopular because the immigrants defense the Trump base, Trump type of process, the base in healthcare reform, rights, law, comprehensive. It's actually independence because it's a government takeover proven by the case argument. There's no extinction argument. The evidence doesn't say it. It doesn't assume it doesn't get to the level it said that oil causes extinction. The evidence also doesn't assume coal in other countries like China and India going on, and Trump's so president is subsidizing all the shit anyways. Now extinction's already happening now. So we do 13. I love the narrative has to already be rejected. Facebook engineers, but let's assure the politics are not having the right to conduct neutral action, taking the response that our politics are already here, and you're living in post block the life where social instrument like bear around and get us dystopian promise of let's trigger response to water comes sort of food and around our future test lab predicting that it's sort of too late and one month realization apocalypse and now the new policy might emerge of prolongation post fundamental change existing unequal society environmental relational component environmental relations now in villaging dissent the dissent's nonsensical healthcare is stimulus if it doesn't have taxes but we do because it's compulsory progressive taxes are extending like stack the largest amount of growth because growth is fastest for rich people. Historically, means the average crucial stop inflation low. This is below. Raising revenues on it's supposed to be the top side. Close to time of inflation control using the banks and funds. Crucial fact most important is inflation fundamental objective taxation is the control of present and future inflation. Inflation is where consumers' business organization kind of final business services that are available can be made. Continuing additions of following of spendable funds and we just cut other spending because it's revenue neutral. Half percent spending will be neutral and the needs of Medicare payroll finance come from payroll-based tax contribution higher income individual have additional finance come from reductions in Medicaid tax the approach would be extensive employers would continue to offer a qualified contract with no impact to economic decline clarity and crisis leads to the behavior of standard reductions in some leaders of crisis crisis grocery usually stuff at the time with our inflation price growth restitution price increase the benefit from economic action leaders C48 I'll cut the card at 48 last one was that you should prioritize winners first priorities the economy means it's a mutual form of authoritarian violence that always leads to extinction of the people because they're seen as drags on the economy which is a bad form of sovereignty which are Turhan evidence impact and says it's a justification for global population that makes extinction of people like Trump have their favor of them on the switch. Let's go to the inflation, the innovation is sad. Case outweighs 100,000 people died, especially disproportionately. Immigrants, we don't kill all. Innovation, there's no way it's true. Pharmaceuticals is not key, but everyone says that things manufacturing are causes. There's other problems, which are things like U.S. is still ahead in things like big data, quantum computing, and a bunch of other shit, high value things, like other manufacturing areas. Now we should reject threat construction. There's no impact, but you by the nationals in kind of four. So one thing that it takes is that again, national security, no Chinese cooperation, enough to check out enemies around from the destruction section of this kind of thing. Unrealism within the terms of the kind of the Chinese treat side, and the retail cost contained that international students and we come all those grenades. How much money you have to innovation, no handshake back up 16. The amount that we know that we're so further than America more powerful. Our just like that free fall. China's resell economy leaders.
Are you good?
Yeah.
So you suggested the plan would be free at the point of service, and then you cited the Wolbert evidence on this question.
Wolbert evidence.
This evidence only says that the poorest 20% paid nothing in premiums. It sounds like
80% of the premiums are really just like taxes. The premiums are taxes. It's pretty interchangeable. The hacker evidence we read says it'd be payroll-based premiums. Payroll tax-based premiums.
Okay, where's that evidence that OYC card?
It's a 2A CE card that we read.
Okay, and you think that card establishes the kind of cost-sharing mechanism of the affirmative?
I think Wolbert and Hacker both say that taxes fund almost all of it.
No. Well, I'm talking about like co-pays and deductibles. Which piece of evidence do you like that question?
Co-pays and deductibles, we will defend that we think that we will tax everything in order to get
that. Wasn't my question. Are there co-pays or deductibles?
No.
Is there a premium for enrolling in the plan?
There's a premium, which is a giant payroll tax, and then the cancellation of other health.
That seems kind of inconsistent. So a tax just affects the whole population. A premium affects people who are in the program, which is
everyone is going to have. We're going to say that there are synonymous. The premium, you can take the premium as a tax. Everyone will have to pay it, even if they don't enroll the plan and want private insurance. There's going to be a tax that everyone has to pay, and that will fund the entirety of the program.
Okay, so people in the program don't pay any co-pays, don't pay any deductibles. Your evidence about Mexico seems to suggest exactly the opposite. It says that 80% of the population does pay premiums, co-pays, and deductibles.
The premiums that it said that you cite are just the tax structure itself. If you pay a premium to the government, that's a tax. We're saying that it's going to be a very progressive tax. Wolbert is talking about progressive taxes that poor people don't pay.
Yeah, it's talking about taxes, and then later it's discussing the premium mechanism, and says that 20% of the population pay nothing, implying that 80%
premiums are taxes is our argument.
Okay.
I don't think it says anywhere else that it says you might go into deductibles.
Right.
We will defend that premiums are taxes.
So if your argument is that we need to prioritize the suffering of undocumented immigrants, why did you opt not to put any of those things in the plan text? It seems like if you wanted to have a highly progressive, highly generous kind of insurance option, you should have read a single payer act that banned co-pays and deductibles.
Well, first, we don't want to conscript people into the program. They should have the freedom not to be regularized, especially that because it's like, you're right about surveillance programs. They should have the option. Paternalism is bad. Two, we think that our evidence actually is about the Mexican model. It says that they have one of the most progressive approaches in the world to undocumented folks. Okay. We think we've modeled the affirmative somewhat off that strategy, and that is good. We have epistemic defenses.
One last question about midterms. So if you're an activist, why should you not be concerned about elections at all?
One, because we don't have when we're talking about radical planning and radical relations to others, especially when we're just academics in a room, the thing that matters is not just trying to predict consequences. It's a question of having the best relations to others and trying to have forefront-headed policy discussions.
it's the interest rate CA, the econ DA, I think is what Dan called it, the one in the C. The repatriation advantage counter plan, the state's counter plan, the pharma DA, and case.
Please say that.
Yeah, give me 1 second. So it's the econ DA, the advantage counter plan, the, what is it? State's counter plan, the pharma DA, advantage DA, and case. Is everyone good to go? You good stuff? Okay, so everyone's good, right? Great. Concede the impact economics decline. The last argument made in the WSU is not a reason to reject the team. They read no piece of evidence justifying the thus the advantage counter plan does solve for the epistemic nature of the act because it solves the sovereign ability to deport people. At best, the act only has a minor incidence of decreasing the chance of things like repatriation. The liberal utopia argument doesn't make any sense. It doesn't say things like the United States is not able to ban repatriation in the first place. The permutation links the permutation do both of links to the net benefit of farm innovation because it would still pass a public option to lead to price control. Price controls doesn't link to the net benefit argument was only about the interest rate CA. The state's counterfund solves 100% of the app because the establishment of a public option for non-citizens is as much specification as the plain text itself is enough about changing the documentation law. Doesn't make any sense because you did not fiat in the plain text. You shouldn't get away with this bullshit. Your interpretation of state's counterfund makes it more unfair because it pays 51 actors as well as the jackal evidence is an example. It's an example of the uniform state beyond the literature endorses things like compact fail means that they're example WSU grounds. I'm going to spend a lot of time on theory because that's the only reason they're going to win. Uniform state beyond good health policy education. Want to see jackal evidence is an advocate for all 50 states excluding these arbitrary and make students bad health policy analysis because they don't learn about important alternatives to federal policy that experts consider the counter plan is vital health policy education. We're 10 there are thousands of articles on federalism. Health scholars have put little into criteria to assess state for special documents, state healthcare arguments, state laws, state reforms, training for determining whether states should lead and whether should move the baby of our arguments for state our federal leadership. These have role limited in discussion of health. State health policy must include uniformity through compact advisor boards of the states were enact universal state-based health insurance when it looked like it was involved multi-state cooperation, compact network, and that's how the constitution variation, single payer, single service, and fixed ACAF states feel engineer team in the playing field uniformity scale. Otherwise, the counter plan is unwinnable. Reasonability can be interpretation or arbitrary consideration involved. There's no basic constitutional uniformity. If we read the non-uniform counter plan player, states reimbursement rates to provide $1 that use their church help none of their office at by Saturday. They first last week have chosen infinite net no impact there. Our real Fed team worthless talk they can turn net benefits, reject the argument. Now they'll reject the argument, not the team. The farm DA turns the entirety of the case. The U.S. China war causes nuclear escalation. The first people on the line in a nuclear war will be the poorest of the undocumented immigrants and the documented immigrants in the first place. And they will use nuclear wars like they start. U.S. warplanes taking the nuclear arsenal and makes military problems of Russian warplanes should see, however, to not nuclear problems limit arsenal most likely the most largest city region of the war points starting to create 1.5 million metric tons of soup from her cities. That's climate water soup would near the top of the stratosphere protecting pollution nuclear arms instead. A nuclear weapon 1 year after the smoke injection there would be temperature drops to 7 degrees. The stratosphere smoke from the regional conflict would just help the ozone layer loss of 57% for 5 years with substantial losses continuing in turns. Down creates more structural violence. Below 17 breakthrough treatments contain disease product controls restrict medication drug represents small size of medical spending. The price control process degrades while being funds for a long term negotiating process at a time. They want to sell a new medication to the store market. American medicine for 90 days. Quicker delay can be deadly, especially with whole integration drugs. Can only have religious approved and 2 often new approvals. Slow to come 6,000 European, 600,000 European deaths can be avoided issue with the healthcare system simply optimally ineffective medical treatment in Japan is not sufficient to render an act valid pan because they concluded we can study China and Japan. Overall, I will be able to see a generalization and do Bible Chinese scholarship is not my intention. While I was given this no by no means be suggesting these Chinese foreign policy scholarship is no guidance I can offer nor is my position to apply the doctrines of Chinese foreign policy to the problem has views really specific relation to specific work to assessing Chinese motivation is possible and epistemologically useful plugged in. And 11 motives can be done. Assessing can be difficult, not possible there. Or always finding out both states of possibility information may be flushed and not lead to rejection of all information analysis. Can use historical to observe constituencies evolution and then motives and spirit dilemma exists because of lack of motivational knowledge. The proper response is to enhance understanding of motives, not start motivational knowledge producing. This procedure will allow states to conform the defense of realist logical tempo, which results in preferable outcomes. Assessing motives and find case and trying to usually prefer blockings can be achieved market. The first few arguments you should have to read a card about any of this. The evidence and evidence that the price controls decrease the revenue and that there's a high correlation between revenues and innovation when it comes to pharmaceutical and biotech companies. Here's more evidence. There are 9 arguments about administrative costs being low importance compared to the detrimental effect of medical innovation, health option, or legal price controls, reductions, many public financing for the mere universal healthcare scheme greatly, and with the rate of medical innovation, Europeans can ignore the negative innovation effects of price control because US pay does the lion's share of global industry profits more than half drug sales occur in the US price controls will develop life saving new drugs for disease like cancer, heart disease, and alternative point evidence that the United States is at the forefront and that China is catching up. Not only our pharmaceutical industry is something to keep China's innovation at bay. The card says that take China's pharmaceutical as one of the most important reasons why innovation is happening now. It proves that the internal link is in focus. The case of consequentialism first, the asking to evidence test is the only ethical form of scenario planning and turns all of your arguments about subject formation because you allow us to make unethical decisions like we should kill 10 people in order to spare one. That is impossible for you to render a decision on. The door evidence does indict your form of ethics because you have said that we should allow for humans to flourish, which is consequentialism. It proves that all of our arguments always revolve back to these things. So your criticism of our ethics don't make any sense. Scenario planning is possible. Social sciences are reliable in determining outcomes. Our evidence that social science research has created profound methods and analytics to accurately predict outcomes of particular events, even if the change are leaky. That's an answer to the Kessler evidence, which is only about limited analysis of Bush era lies, but none of our internal link chains you should have to prove. The specificity of our arguments doesn't matter. All ethical considerations, I have already made this argument. The don't have BS beyond the plain text not mandate anything about repealing certain restrictions on mandating. You have left the plaintiff the powers of a Republican Congress. They would never assume that's what it's supposed to mean. Trump will ensure none of that happens. Cost sharing turns this whole advantage and takes out any ethical considerations. If immigrants matter so much, why do you make them pay? They would still have co-pays, deductibles, hospital bills. That mess of plan just reduces them a little, but doesn't solve. They still couldn't pay their bills, and they will get deported anyways. It deters use because people on the public option still fear bills. The government doesn't cover the care they receive. They just offer a low-cost insurance option. The plain text being so big means you air negative. Something that should bring your decision is that they don't have a single piece of evidence that says the public option will lower consumer costs or medical debt. They also don't retroactively reduce debt so that people will seek care and get deported because of back bills. Also, all of our case terms are reasons you aren't a disruption to some sovereign entity. So no, when AR pivots in the public option were to be competitive, then it wouldn't solve tomorrow. 17 to compete the public option has to avoid same cover tax, private insurance, employment, other cost insurance. We brought collecting improvements and restricting payments by 9 times insurance have decades of experience in giving position and creates giving results in the higher cost to consumers. The two-tier system of the app results in the healthiest, richest people having good insurance, and the government plan only having the poorest and the sickest. The Mexico example proves this argument. They have shitty healthcare unless you are rich. There's longer evidence about how hospitals will get rid of the more costly payments. That would be those on the public option. Here's some evidence that supports this argument. Flowers. 17, the public option sounds good in theory, but has not worked in practice because it draws sickest patients are able to cover their care while keeping premiums and out-of-pocket costs affordable. Private insurance experts attracting the healthiest enrollees and wealth of studies backs this up. However, 16 private insurance are expected to attract considerably better risk if the healthy high income members switch to private insurance. The government raises premiums to compensate relatively healthy undersoft office adverse selection. That's part of the evidence presented this. And other people suggest that adverse selection is a serious issue in the German system. The immigrants want to use the care in the first place. The light evidence is about preventing death because access to care costs wait outside hospitals will attract immigrants down. Even if it's not true, immigrants feel as if it is, which means that they want to be deterred from going to hospitals. Cleaner evidence isn't about surveillance of hospitals, only writ large, not a theoretical abstraction. obstruction. It's happened and will continue to happen. The card you cited about Mexico is only about income-based premiums. Those deter care. Will handler and Hamilstein 18. Those prepare law company for flight and sail very quickly user. Charges penalize the sick minimal companies to discourage forming from filling prescription heart attack. Victims worry about cost delays. Coming to the ER with fatal consequences. Companies boosting administrative costs means they're very useful to income ad. More bureaucratic complexity. Companies are necessary before Canada implemented costs compared to the US and bank companies costs are now half the US and administrative flight and sail cost sharing is extremely difficult. Increases inequalities. Johnson 14. The difficulty exchange fees for verifying eligibility. The federal exchange had been unable to resolve 2.9 million data inconsistencies in the district income dramatically skewed 20%. Earned a median income of 11,490 per year tax cuts based on predictions of annual income.
I'm gonna take a little bit.
Wolford, that was the part I was trying to report. The one about 3 points.
Uh, 25, 26 seconds to use 704. You go for past tense?
Yeah.
Okay. So the first set of questions I have involves the counterplan. This Jackal piece of evidence, it makes a claim about how like there would be some states who would want to have similar compacts. Where does it say that this would be a uniform compact that everyone will do?
Well, we have audited it. The Jackal evidence says that, the Jackal evidence provides proof that it is possible and could happen. Multiple states can enter compacts together.
I mean, yeah, that makes a lot of sense, but where does it say that they would enter into one giant compact that replicates the federal?
I think that it's more of an example that interstate compacts on healthcare are something that's within the literature. There's plenty of math arguments that say those things fail. You can also read solvency deficits to like Republican states would botch the interstate compact. We obviously can't be out of those things.
Okay, and this Greer evidence talks about federal versus state dominance. It says that there's a comparative advantage for states because they can attest their own preferences, which are different.
Sure.
If that is true that they have their own preferences, and that's the literature, why would HAP be talking about uniform 50-state fiat? Like, allow us to have those literature debates about them, about like the different preferences.
Yeah, so I don't think that the 1 in C text necessarily says that every state agrees on everything. It just says that those states will coordinate on all fields relevant to implementation of aforementioned policies.
So they would coordinate, but they would still like to all areas of that implementation. What's the difference between that and like the HHS working with other agencies?
Like, what do you mean?
Like the HHS coordinates with a bunch of different agencies, even at the state level, or just even within the government itself. Sure. Why is this like not the same thing?
Well,
as the
agency counter plans aren't necessarily competitive. It's possibly something that you could do with the USFG plan.
Last question is the case questions. Actually, no, the pharmaceutical stuff.
Okay.
The terms case argument. You
Yeah.
make like 5,000 people don't get prescription drugs. How do immigrants get these drugs to turn the case, like to run the case terms if they don't have insurance?
Well, we're saying that you would lead to more individuals dying that are not necessarily undocumented.
So, but it doesn't turn the immigrant stuff. It doesn't touch the immigrants.
No, we have said nuclear war turns the immigrant stuff. They would be the people on the front lines. We have
Why
said
is that
that you lead
true?
to
Like,
more structural violence, which means there's no ethical decision.
The case stuff. So the question I have is, how is this adverse selection stuff? It sounds like it's bad for the government's tab and they have to pay a bunch. How does it reduce care? Like, how does it make it bad for life outcomes?
Well, because the two-tier arguments that we have made, I read the Woolhandler and Himmelstein evidence. It says that when you have sliding scale premiums.
Let's get to that. That says copays and deductibles. It doesn't say tax-based premiums.
No part of the plain text fiat thing. I've made an argument why you should be beholden to the fiat of the plain text. It is too vague. You have left it to the powers that be.
The order is different.
So that's good.
I already did.
Warming caustic seems to be a runaway method released in biodiversity clubs outwards and might be fuel and truly existential risk future. Actors can do things to mitigate violence against immigrants, while influence climate change means certain tipping points is totally inevitable. Always have probability tons of science that backs up incredible threat from climate change like Kessler evidence about terrorism, military industrial conflicts, exaggerating threats. It's not a forced choice between caring about immigrants and caring about judicial appointments. But voting didn't get maximizes both lower court appointments, determining rulings over things like the treatment of immigrants by law enforcement and due process in deportation, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff related to civil liberty. Shonen 17 lower courts decide 90% of all cases. They lay critical focus on whether rights, contraception, privacy, setting, prisoner rights, human rights, immigration, the desegregation, employment discrimination, affirmative action, workplace, rules of equality, ideological extremism, tumble voice, racist concerns, the nominees which really concern their reverse rights, acceptability, judicial constitutional policing, inhuman vote, police conditions, uplifted, to protect the immigrants, the violence, the people, points, rulings, and all these issues warming, increasing structural harshment, violence, weighing, and affecting the environmental systems, resulting in conflict, climate change, combat violent conflicts, geopolitical dimensions, climate change, post-integration, race relations, agriculture, race, and high level civil conflicts of weight, the climate change are not the anticipated increase in immigrants lead to dispute conflicts on all research on quantified efficiency, climate change acts threat multiplier, market power, and threat multiplier, the death evaluate them in terms of you can't think about the plan's effects solely in terms of its relations because they have said the plan text is a good idea. If we win, there's a bad political strategy that is also a bad related form of relationality. It doesn't, their model makes it impossible for the negative twin because we can't generate link arguments to relationality itself. We can only generate to the consequences. The Brown evidence does not say ignore consequences, just says critical theory is good. We agree you should consider how critical theory influences particular political strategies and how that will affect the overall electoral environment and the unintended consequences of that. The uniqueness debate, you can see that Dems will win a simple majority now. They'll win Nevada, Arizona, and Nebraska. It's about our specific scenario, and the only type of uniqueness relevant to our internally, their evidence is about the House Dems will win Arizona, 200 seats blocked in, and 390. So 3 seats in campaign seats Nevada, Rosen, and San Francisco will get race included one. Like Nevada's from the President 27 is lead to the health being a for Republicans Arizona. Submitted the benefits of the rest of GP priorities to back to join the GP's government below 5.1 billion in the Tennessee. President can define out to wealthy and prepared to spend the black to the first year for the scene. Their first warrant was unpredictable. It's soon enough to model A and 12/13 the special election resulted in their GP position Trump took over ratings well. Represent the house 11 president junior health is something for things to check on so quickly. Verifies the change much between split election cycle and the midterm. Second is gerrymandering. We read a Senate scenario, so that's irrelevant. Third warrant is funding. We're way ahead on that. Giants getting 222B. The Dems are defending 26 seats in the midterms, so the Lieutenant Governor continuing gas spending challenges demonstrating interest ready to capitalize on Trump's city whole numbers. The fourth warrant is turnout. They have no pulse on this. The Dems are way ahead on enthusiasm. Very 13 Dems enjoy 10 point eventually double-digit lead with Trump. Dems performance in upcoming elections. So this is point the January sessions and Dems are holding enthusiasm among the independent for the Dems. Lead by 12. Lead by 12 points. The link debate. They read no card that substantiates the plan is unpopular. You can see it fast with evidence, particularly to the Senate. It's like actual polling data, which indicates that Republicans are going to lose Senate seats now because of the botched attempt to repeal and replace, which means people hate Republican senators in the status quo plan. Disrupts that narrative, which takes away a major campaign tool for the Democrats. The Dems need to maintain the anti-Trump sentiment in order to win there. Courting immigrants is key to the Senate majority of the plan. Seals and Wade Phillips in 18D. Listen for Dems Latinos, largest non-white Latinos have a number of swing key races from the outside control of the Senate. Dems need to pick up 2 seats while protecting 1 seat challenges. Little black challenges more manageable jobs. One might point 10 seats to the Dems are by defeating Clinton comments. And NATO Sense and the Democrats in most people seats are Arizona, Nevada, 2 seats to large new population. And because of the papers in Texas, one of the teams are going to win the toss cruising. Republicans will adopt the plan to court immigrant brothers Hollander and Craig Hill, 14 Republican rather helping GP regain control of it, spending from the GOP candidates, one independent races for governance and after aggressive outreach campaigns includes financial language has from the civil liberty, multi-ethnic coalition teams lots of the Dems are partly growing at share of the future Republicans could shape Dems the advantage with Hispanics. The warming debate is not inevitable. In 15 it's possible to reduce the risk of the electric theory of power related to Republican leaders, saving points increase greatly the necessary to hold the constitution below 500 for 500 keep on the reasonable chance sustainable degrees of trends to change rapidly, significantly rapidly, think of all these certain lots of emissions literally coming through south, we exhausted before 40 years without strong action. They have read the strong new evidence just as impacts are already happening. Obviously, we know that, but more impacts will happen in the future, such as methane release, which caused an extinction. The China argument, they haven't read a card substantiate a wave of litigation is coming now will be sufficient to force governmental action, which solves the Trump argument and spills over international affairs. And will allow 17 lawsuits in the U.S. and law claiming black political action may increase the trend towards a greater world legal process and for questioning the pressure the government's rapid action six for really unleash a wave of similar countries redefine the world's being knocked out front willing to be felt around the world.
You want me to read more Saul's case cards? I mean Saul's climate change cards or the link stuff? The progressive.
Progressive.
The plan allows Donald Trump to stay progressive rock and attempt to use your Trump campaign strategy with confident the Labor Democratic Party but bullshit about facing the majority waivers all around the truth for Bernie Trump the never were the working class who's seeking entity. Those are becoming the Republicans of Ojo Bernie help your country Trump by asking change towards lobbying group of Trump the best way to suit Democrats make a volunteer method was removing the charge on punishing progressive turn as sufficient to swing the election guard here and like in 17 the bench will test for the policy but not progressives to back the German political millennials murders the majority believes that healthcare the numbers to change about United States about 50.5% involved in this Arizona, Colorado, Florida, Georgia, Iowa, Michigan, Nevada, North Carolina, Iowa, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Wisconsin, the voters who said 2018 mid-election are 60%.
Yes.
They sent out some cards in the chain, by the way. So there's gonna be a document and a chain, 2 cards in the chain.
Do you mind if I?
Yeah, those cards underneath those. Even, yeah, it's all underneath this then.
These are drawing on.
Yes.
Alright, is there anyone who is not ready? Oh, the case, the repatriation counterclaim, the state's counterclaim, the midterms dissent, and the final dissent. I kind of just like this.
Yeah, can you do the order again? That's
Oh, you didn't hear it, alright. Case, repatriation counterclaim, state's counterclaim, midterms, then
far left.
I'm going to the bathroom if you want to take that. No? I'm not going to go to the bathroom. Get up,
I don't know who it is.
Is there anyone who's not ready?
Worth no message.
Anyone who's not ready? Awesome. On the YouTube, you can see that Vortex analysis as the types of consequences you prioritize. You contemplate the Kessler analysis here, the questions of internal link chains leading to more and more improbabilities as a reason that rational decision making or ability to predict consequences breaks down because every decision we make has infinite possibilities, which means that there's a wrong way to evaluate consequences, which means we can still be consequential. So, but it's a question of the ethical consequences you prioritize, i.e. the immediate ones, like deportations or pay people time without insurance hours, the ones you proceed in debate, which means that if we win that the negative strategies in any way complacent with those, then that is a reason why you would default affirmative on the ethical scenario, on the ethics scenario, your social science, interlinked to it, it's literally irrelevant. It's only in a vacuum. It's not good in the context of how your advantages construct ideas of probabilities or for instance, the midterm dissent and questions of optics and how things are perceived. None of that is in the social science that this card is talking about. It's just talking about how the field of economics is a good idea. It's literally irrelevant if our specific index, your internal link structures are the only thing in context of that dissent. That is the reason why you refuse it based off the Kessler analysis, which is the context of decision making, not just social science in general. Now the next argument about the immigrants being turned away, me think the play would look like an overturn in the period to be or anything less than 90s, which would refuse things like recording citizenship status for denying them. Exit to a church that's school, they've made an argument about why it would happen otherwise, which means the affirmative gets control our interpretation of what field looks like in this world. The field looks like in this world. Now the cost argument, we think we do lead a better cost showing the plan. You can see the plan crafts out private insurance that would lead to the federal government being the monopoly in the market, which would be able to then bargain down costs better than rather than competing with other private insurers, which you conceded.
Their premium stuff is about co-pays and
Also,
deductibles,
your
not
premium
about
argument
tax-based
is about
payments.
co-pays and deductibles. The Wilbur evidence indicates it's a tax-based premium. They have not provided you another reading of the card that makes any sense in that question.
Adverse selection is only about like being bad for the government paying.
And adverse selection is only about being bad for the government paying. Who cares about that? All your other evidence is not about our public option, just about public option. Anything else? Repatriation confirmed. You can see the biggest solvency deficit on the counterclaim, which is that it still kills those without frozen insurance. Evidence indicates that there are 100 and 1,000 little death per year avoid due to uninsurance for people who for a field prescription. The counterclaim only bans repatriation, which means deportation at health safety net clinics because things like from federal immigration bodies still occurs. The plan makes those types of deportations structurally impossible because it expands every care facility to undocumented folks, making that form of surveillance impossible. It also still provides insurance for people to access, which means that this counterplan is not even a flash in the pan. It doesn't do anything to help the structural conditions that undocumented people face in this country. The term had evidence that as a primary reason.
States.
Actually, okay. States. Units and interpretation that can only fiat devolution. Just states not uniform implementation of the policy there, uniform implementation because they have just said that the states would coordinate on that actual definition of what that looks like, or spelling out what those different compacts look like. In fact, they've only defended a single compact, which means necessarily you don't need the interpretation. Now, the Alexander offense first one, you can see the topic process argument. The states destroy domestic political topics because comparative literature does not focus on the impact is bad topic writing and affirmative race to the margins to talk about soft power or trade, which strikes substantive roles of core issues like questions like uniformity versus patchworks within. Those are big questions. The second piece of offense is there's no literature on this question. The entire point of the patchwork laboratories of democracy versus uniformity of the federal policy means the counterplan skirts the literature base and fiat through every solvency deficit like leakage or like linkage or dissonance between the states, which is destroys education and also skews strategy because our literatures are never external because the counterplan can always solve that through uniformity. Now the their argument actually, you should reject the team first. You've conceded your valid. Okay. They say that the one to see evidence on what cross proves your jackal evidence is about the various multi-state compacts where they agree on different things, not one uniform compact, which means your counterplan text is different from your jackal evidence. All of our solvency deficits are questions about things like how would they agree on or coordinate on tax rates means that you are forms of uniformity. The neighbor argument, you still get the devolution counterplan. You didn't answer the counter interpretation, which means things like midterms are a buffer to neighbor on the afterplaces. Doesn't make any sense because the counterplan can. If you have through all of those questions, reject the team because your ballots are a form of deterrence, which sets a precedent for better top rating. Go to midterms. You place in the Brown evidence pedagogical versus space, provides a unique possibility to link ethics to decision making and policy that actual policymakers cannot do. So you're measuring evaluating this debate to affirm a creation of a counter hegemonic discourse that refuses complacency with deportations and letting unsure people die. The paradigmatic shift in how states should function and new constructions of health policy that center non-citizens is a radical vision that you should affirm, even if the dissent is 100% true. And also the dissent should be rejected for the Brown evidence. Centering our politics around right-wing backlash and electoral politics is epistemically bankrupt because we are always secure the decaying status quo. The negative would suppose that black communities fighting environmental racism in the 70s should have had to deal with that pollution and not ruffle feathers of the electoral system so Nixon wouldn't get elected. The affirmative demands you orient policy towards non-citizens, which means your obligation to immigrants in this space is infinite. That's the Brown evidence. Now the giving this debate is impossible to bring control all of your cards about how the Clinton will be captured by the GOP are pre-Trump and pre-Tyrus Trump campaign, which was radically anti-immigrant and anti-undocumented people, which means that you do not actually have a piece of evidence that indicates why the Trump administration would take credit and they took better GOP vote out. It's also impossible because things like turnouts always favor the GOP and come evidence.
Stan can't predict vote karma.
Which means it
can't predict because low turnout and always midterms.
Low turnout and incumbent effects, which means your entire league is contrived, not a plan. Pharma.
Just the innovation stuff.
Okay. Innovation argument is your internal link is literally nonsense. All it says is that the is a question of manufacturing center leading to competitiveness, but you draw forensics analysis, things like US being ahead of quantum computing, military technology, or STEM fields means that, or China being ahead of green technology, steel, or traditional manufacturing means it's impossible to determine which sector is key. Your evidence only says take the pharmaceuticals as an example, not that it is key to competitiveness abroad.
everyone gets their order. So the advantage counter plan, the pharma VA, the state's counter plan, midterm space.
Advantage counter plan, pharma, DA,
States,
states,
midterm space.
midterms.
Everyone, here we go.
Counterclaim of conditional not going forward, pharma DA only defense not going forward, states counterclaim it is a reason to reject the argument. At best, your ballot does not serve as a deterrent. People will not stop reading the state's counterclaim just because you vote against Wichita State. Your interpretation is also worse, which is something that you conceded in the 1AR because it is 51 actors. The federal government has to do something. They think that all 50 states act to do the same thing as the plain text. It essentially is uniform, but as one more actor makes it impossible to get any form of solvency deficits. The counterclaim text also never specifies uniform, or rather just coordinate, which isn't the same thing. Coordinating on policies means that there is going to be discussions that happen that could possibly derail the output. Proves that we have left sufficient ground for a solvency deficit to be made. It is not my fault that you didn't read a single card. It's saying that the state's counterclaim is also good. The state's counterclaim is good. It evens the playing field between the app and the neg. And national health insurance is a vast term that leads to multiple different forms of single payer public option. Things ACA is the only way for the negative to be ahead, and things like that. But when people break new apps or any possible small thing, Fed key warrants are also something that are pervasive on this topic. There's a reason why states cannot limit states cannot do certain taxation schemes. Why they cannot do things because of because of things like Verizon. Not a reason. Just because you didn't read a card does not mean it's a reason to reject the team. Because you can also say things like compacts fail the career evidence, and Jackal proves that it is possible for uniform to happen because states have entered into compacts before. The counterclaim falls 100% of the app because it establishes the public option regardless of citizenship status. You have not made a material solvency deficit to the counterclaim, which means you should err negative. There's no question of taxation rates in the plain text. You should just assume that the counterclaim is the same level of specificity as the plain text. All solvency deficits are because of contrived fiat questions that are not based on evidence in the 1AC or the 2AC. It solves the epistemic nature of the app, which means you should err negative on any impact rate question because it stops repatriation, it increases coverage, and it stops Republicans from winning, which means that we are doubly good. The midterm scheme warming causes extinction. It's the only direct future actors consult the app. Failure to act now makes warming inevitable. Voting negative is better form of relationality and immigrant. Climate change plus math doesn't suffering on global south who are largely not responsible for emissions. When it says environmental stress to stabilize the social relation increases the risk of military conflict, which is way larger linked to Western imperialism and post-structural violence in the plain because it's global and scope. The act is limited to the U.S. judicial appointments determine a right way to social justice, including immigration walk-in, which like structural violence more broadly. Trump gets all of his appointments rules back in the plain because they will rule against the abstract interpretation of the plain text. And on questions about how the plain gets implemented, the Kessler evidence is irrelevant. They have dropped the majority of this debate, which means assume it is true. Multiply probability of the data is still very high. The Democrats are winning a simple majority now. You have conceded the entirety of the uniqueness debate. They are ahead in Arizona, Nevada, and Tennessee. I forgot to answer the pedagogy argument. The app is a bad form of pedagogy and encourages us to pursue political strategies with backfire, elevating ethical relations. The abstract is impossible because it requires specific solutions. Our arguments not an excuse. Political conservatism when sit and out would be Trump's student. You should interfere with that. They make it possibly net. We can't read DAs to the abstract relationship they have with immigrants. Only to be consequences of attempted solution back to uniqueness. The Democrats are winning a +2 game in the Senate now because of things like funding. The Donetsky Plotkin evidence says that they are possible to get to a simple majority, which is key to stopping a shift to conservative courts because they are able to block appointments. The status quo is that the Republicans only need 51 in the Senate to get all the judicial appointments through. The progressives link was conceded. Makes it very easy for you to vote negative. For Trump will create healthcare for everyone with the public option because which stops the campaign strategy away from the Democrats. The progressives are not locked in on which party they will vote for. Hence why Bernie Rose swung in the election for Trump in the first place. It causes a massive wave to happen for the Republicans. The progressives never are enough to swing the entire election, especially in key states like Nevada, Arizona, and Tennessee. That was the late evidence. The late evidence judicial appointments are key there. There's not much else on the DA. Makes it very easy to negative about the case. If we have any case term, you should err negative on the impact calculus question because 2024 is better than providing bad health care. You also lead to bad types of consequentialism. The ICE's evidence says that when we prioritize 1 versus 10, we always make unethical decision calculus because we say it is justified to kill 10 people as long as we provide health care to one. There's no ethical decision for you to make on these two different types of claims. Your argument also devolves back to consequentialism, which is what all of your critiques are of the Dora evidence says that if you prioritize things like human flourishing, you are still a prioritization of the consequences. You link to all of your arguments too because you have created assumptions. Hence why hospitals will not report citizenship status or repeal certain policies. You rely on conjecture to solve your average. The reason why you should vote negative on presumption, the plan should have to. The plan doesn't say whether or not they get rid of copays or deductibles. You should assume that is what happens because that is normal needs for public option. The copays and deductibles make it impossible for people to access healthcare. The Woolhandler evidence says that it discourages use. This turns both of their advantages. The Woolmer evidence doesn't say that it is free at the point of service, but rather free at the point of service or that there's taxes but they cost premiums. Rather just gives an example of Mexico giving it to the poorest individuals. It never justifies any of the choicy conjecture arguments. You do not increase coverage. You lead to a two-tier system. The Panhandler evidence says that it is costly for individuals to use it in the first place, deters immigrants from using it, as well as does insult repatriation because they will still have to pay massive amounts out of pocket. This lawyer evidence says the reason why people get deported is because providing costly care, that is what will happen with the high-risk pool of the plain text. No, you are not a single payer because the more evidence says that you still have to act like an authoritative private health insurance figure in the first place.
What was the second paragraph again?
The more evidence
case counterpoint and midterms. One good.
You have a really low threshold to vote affirmative. Probabilism means that if we have some income to flow that seems plausible, that denies the certain premise of the dissent, it takes out a large portion. Even small reductions in probabilities cause large-scale drops in the plausibility the probability of a dissent, because decimals on decimals, essentially even one that is low causes exponentially low outcomes. If we win, if we even have that mitigate part of the uniqueness or the link level, the predictions level, or the internal link level, it means you just deny the dissent, regardless. You still have an estimate privatization of undocumented people. Let's go to the debate where I'll explain that. They say that you should that case comes that decision comes first, consequences come first. They wonder why we prioritize 1 versus 10 lives. You should think about it this way: the very high risk of giving 10 undocumented people health care, or the very low risk of giving 100 white people life by avoiding nuclear war. You should always side with the immigrants because the reality is white people already have it good. With citizens have it great and everything's well, but things are already fucked with the status quo. There's large-scale medical deportations, there's large-scale deportations in general with undocumented people. There's histories of colonialism, which is all in case terms are not unique. The world is screwed. The world is bad, which means that you should over-prioritize, over-invest in undocumented people's welfare. That means that you should that means yes, we take some consequences, but the only thing that matters is the welfare of undocumented folks. There's very little meaning to very little defenses of why citizens should matter as much in episodic framings of in ethics. They say that they say that we create assumptions, which is that we have low probabilities as well. No, yes, we have assumptions, obviously, but you have not disproven that many of your assumptions are true. You only have a cost-sharing style argument and a plan interpretation style argument, which I'll go to right now is proof that we have a high risk of the affirmative. They say that the plan that's very high. The plan is good. We have a specific advocate, even if we don't have any plan text that's melded around that. The epistemology of the affirmative obviously shapes the way the plan would get implemented, which is all the arguments that Kells makes. We would not have things like copays for poor people or evidence of taxes premiums based off the Mexican model, which is the best system in the world. We should have a high respect for the system that the system that we would offer, because it's all about taxes premiums. There's not copays, which means that's at the point of service. We would pay once through federal taxes. That's mostly progressive. That the bottom 20% of people would have to pay zero, which is the Wilbur evidence. Now they say that there's going to be the two-tier system. Naturally, you conceded your argument that said that we're single payer. There's no private insurance in place. The high-risk pool is no impact, which means it's costly, but there's no reason why everyone being in this giant pool isn't good. They're not going to be. They haven't made an argument about why the companies would be evil, why they're going to try and do bad things like skip on healthcare or cut services or get people out. It means you should not forefront for that for them when you read evidence. Let's go to the state's counterpoint. State's counterpoint. We're just going to go for the theory arguments. Our interpretation solves a vast majority of your offense, but we have some offensive reasons why you should only get devolution. The counterprediction that you get the devolution default power to the state's counterpoint, not uniform implementation of all policy. It's not worse for us, it's better. We get to say arguments like Alabama and Texas will fucking deport immigrants if they get healthcare, if they have authority over healthcare, which is the best solvency that's specific to the topic literature on university education. 50 states, we only get stupid arguments like leakage and economy-based stuff that starts to reinforce soft power and things like trade, which is just bad form. You read the topic, which is when you read the topic, which is the state's which means that you read the way, see what's written, which means that in order to compensate for that, you should have a very low threshold to reject the argument. They say coordination is distinct from. You haven't told us how that's true. Coordination, all likelihood would be that we could
that you'd be able to wish away shit like Texas and Louisiana will be mean to immigrants by saying they'll coordinate so that it's about without respect to citizenship. Prove by having a counter correction that said that they would do things without the respect to citizenship in the capital Texas and Valencia. They say that there's also a lit checks debate here. I'm going to do the uniforming debate for the master debate. You're wrong. There's not going to be any of that. Your evidence, the Jack Levin starts the RGGI, 12 different fishery compacts, which are all distinct and they're different compacts with different responsibilities, with different options. It proves that there's a litany of different preferences that are not common causal. Your next piece of evidence, the 2NC says that the Weissler evidence, the Greer evidence says assumes multiple different compacts with different preferences, which means that that's why it says that the federal government should not dominate states because states have different preferences. Which means that you crowd out that debate. You should reject the argument because it causes bad education and it causes large strategy and raises topics. Go to midterms. Midterms this time, you just have to win a little bit of defense. The warming stuff, the interlink stuff, their own minority use evidence provide tons of facts to explain midterms turn out. What's ruling that her GP candidates that are hashtag truth that Dems are out of funding Senate races that allow them to saturate the election narratives. Three, that Democratic enthusiasm and all-time high believes that traditional midterms prediction factors are not applicable, which is narrative is even more unpredictable. The win level's nonsense. They have zero warrant for how Trump GP take credit for the plan of labels. So we send the Trump it's bullshit nice now. You click the ACA for those GP election plan for necessity, or general cards. Courts are, but doesn't prove the case because the immigrants are being fucked in the South, so they don't have healthcare, they're already getting deported. State level judges are bad as well. He said that they self-warning is very unlikely, especially because Trump is saying coal. He likes oil industries. There's a bunch of things outside of just oil drilling and stuff that means they should be very uncertain that they solve all war makers and watch all causes.
Wait.
the decision's pretty open and negative from what you all stated. I can start. The short version of my decision is that I ended up evaluating that the counterclaim is legitimate and solved the app. Plus that there's some mitigation to the DA, but the lack of a solvency deficit. The counterclaim made it hard to resolve the debate in the app's favor. So in terms of the theory on states, I thought that the negative had some offense that was a little under-answered about states being good to check new small apps. They kind of asserted that like NHI is a really big term. There's room for pushback there about how the topic is played out kind of small, but that didn't really happen. I also thought that they had defense to the offense that you went for. They said that they don't fiat uniformity, so it's just coordination through this context. So theoretically, that stuff about like Texas and Alabama messing things up, I think is still an argument that's available. And I also thought that they had some arguments that the state suggests isn't that arbitrary because there are federal keys about like taxes and things like that. I can even frame your argument a little bit differently to be something like the state's counterclaim kills every app that's not single payer, and make your state's bad argument less about like soft power and trade advantages, like causing a run towards them advantages, which was a little underexplained, and more about like app innovation, how it like limits the potential for apps like yours, which deal with smaller, like specific populations and stuff like that. The DA, again, there's a little bit of mitigation, but I thought they were ahead on the mechanics of it. The warming impact was pretty big. My advice for the affirmative generally would be, I think parts of the 2AR feels a little disjointed. I can see like kind of two 2ARs. I think there's a way you can make a solvency deficit of the counterclaim by framing this prioritization, like when you prioritize immigrants, maybe explain that in the context of the counterclaim a little bit, to say like the counterclaim, as per your like other Ks of politics that you kind of have floating around, like cares more about political expediency than immigrants, which means that like epistemology is something that's important for implementation, like you sound a case that are lead to like worse outcomes. Another option is that I think you could go kind of all in on the states theory and then do a little bit more kind of nudging the judge about what happens if like you win states theory, don't kick the counterclaim for them, and then stuff that's just like we still win at status quo versus the app. So some more even if statements about what happens if they win a large risk of the GA and counterclaim, or what happens, how the judge should resolve the debate if the state's theory goes against you, things like that would be helpful.
So I'll go next. I voted neg, though in a convoluted and entirely different way. I rejected the counterclaim on theory. I thought it was like kind of a bit of the theory debate I could go into, but it was a bit of two ships passing in the night for me, and that I agree the Aff did not really address the like strat argument of like, hey, it's keep checking a bunch of apps. On the other hand, I don't think that the neg wins that they like create discussions that are at all based in literature, and so I'm just like left with this. We can have silly debates, but like they'll be more unfair to the neg, like difficulty weighing those two things. I thought just internals for their own impact, the Aff did a somewhat better job, just like impacting why we care and why this leads to silly debates. But like it's a bit of a very classic low-level one side talked about like strategic research, one side talked about literature, and no one really like talked about how I care about those two things versus each other. So I would certainly like doing that would probably pick up more ballots. I don't know how Scott voted on that. On the other hand, the main problem is I just don't think you have an angle on the dissad that helps you. You have like the beginnings of a couple different ones, but none of them end up very developed in the 2AR. The one that I think is best is basically the one you start on the case where you talk about the dissad's going to be like very low probability because of like the conjunction fallacy, like multiplying many things that are like not one. Problem is I don't think you actually tell a story of why the dissad is different from the Aff in that regard. Like by the time you get to the dissad, your application is essentially just to list the defensive arguments that you've made. That's like something that they have done as well, as list defensive arguments against the case. And so I think you either need to go all in on like some particular ones that you think demonstrate the vacuity of the politics dissad, like uniqueness is probably a good one in this example, where like not even their parts think this is remotely close to certain. they're only talking about 3 races or whatever, or just tell the qualitative story of like why they have many more steps in their process that involves projecting an electoral impact, projecting how an election's going to go right now, projecting that nothing happens in the next 6 months, then to court appointments, then to what the courts rule, blah, 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 blah. Like that story then I think needs to get told if you're going to opt for like the grand narrative strategy. But I'm left with Aff helps the people it says it should help. I do prioritize undocumented immigrants. I don't think they really answer that. Only defense on the case that I think really matters is like the Trump deterrence argument, because all the rest appear to be about like insurance markets functioning, and the Aff just kind of fiats through that and says it doesn't matter. We'll just like pay for all the undocumented workers. But if I'm weighing that against the politics that says I don't think you've really put on a different playing field than the affirmative, that just seems like worse even for the people I'm supposed to prioritize, because they will die in mourning, and also the judges will do terrible things.
So DA, so the DA.
It's just DA combination outweighs and turns the case, and I don't think you managed to put it on like a different playing field, either via like the stuff you had in the 1AR and then didn't go for about like this basically is like political blackmail. Like we should just forefront like literally doing good policies and not care about the political implications, or on the level of the dissent is like bad scholarship and not probable.
I give the negative counterplan. I think the theory debate here is not debated particularly deeply by either team. I think the arguments need a lot more development and a lot more clash on both sides. The arguments that are here, you make the claim that we capture theirs by saying you can only devolve as our counterinterpretation. What's missing for that for me is an explanation of how it is that the counterinterpretation captures the offense they claim is that debate itself is structurally unfair, and so they need an unfair counterplan to counterbalance the unfairness of debate. And there's not an answer in either the 1AR or 2AR to that explicit claim about debate itself being structurally unfair, because first speech, last speech, you just need to make sure you technically answer that argument. And why it is that devolution solves that offense that they're going for, I don't. I mean, it solves the get a state counterplan. What it is that means vis-a-vis that claim that they've made, I don't quite get. Then the structural claim you make as to why the counterplans are unfair is you just say they make a rigged game, and then they make some claims that there are arguments that you could make. In fact, we did read evidence isn't our fault, that you could have said there's no solvency or read evidence why compacts don't work or other things. And I think you just need more of a developed argument as to how it is that it rigs the game and why it is that it makes for silly debates. And there's just you need to go a little bit further to answer those arguments as to why all of the pseudo-claimed arguments that they've made are actual arguments rather than not real arguments, because all of the things that they talk about they would be out of the way. You're right about that. But I just think you need to engage those arguments in a line by line more. The other question that is the factual question of whether or not the judicial evidence allows national compacts or not, you make a claim that they're just about fisheries. That evidence does say that there are 200 active compacts, most of which are regional, but 22 of which are national in scope. And it talks about ombudsman. And the fisheries one, maybe national one, that regulates how interstate conflicts over fisheries are dealt with, but it doesn't say that it precludes the possibility of national. I have some hesitancy here because the 2NR kind of punts out of, says that no, the counterplan never said we were a single compact, we can be multiple compacts so that we can do that. And the text of the counterplan clearly says and the compact, it does not create that possibility of multiple compacts. So had your evidence not created that national compact, I might have used that as a reason to say that you have mischaracterized what the counterplan does. They have accurately characterized your evidence as saying there are no national compacts. The trouble is I just think that evidence says national compacts are included. I don't know what that means by national compact. I don't know if that means all 50 states. I don't know. I mean, there's not really a discussion of what that means. It seems to me that you could do more to talk about how it is that those compacts can happen, so that if regional states had a compact that created a public option that anybody could get access, so that was, say, imagine red states turning blue, Texas New Mexico, Arizona, California, states where immigrant populations actually need access to healthcare and where undocumented live, that you wouldn't necessarily, I mean, there are undocumented in every single state, but it seems you could make some arguments as to why it is that you don't necessarily need a national compact to access, because the solvency for this app is different than the solvency of other healthcare apps in terms, it seems like you could make some defense of how it is that multiple compacts would work or regional compacts would work to access their app in terms of how it is that those arguments operate. So I think they win based on that the counterplan is a viable option for them, and you don't challenge at all whether it accesses the ethics at all in the 2AR, which means if they win the counterplan and any risk of a dissat, that I think you're clearly in trouble in the debate. The other thing, you kind of bank on this Kessler evidence, and this is going to be more me talking because this isn't an argument. This is kind of an advice of reading evidence and making arguments. I don't think this evidence says, you've got it highlighted so it sounds like it says what you wanted to say, but I don't think reading the non-highlighted part of this evidence is really making that argument. As I read the argument, there's kind of two claims that are being made here. This is an indictment of how it is that terrorism scenario planning is done. The first half of it, where you've got it highlighted to talk about catastrophes, what it's talking, that the argument that the author is making there is that that we shouldn't call 9/11 a catastrophe because catastrophes like earthquakes are things that political decisions can't impact. So when we use the discourse of catastrophe to describe it, that it operates in an outside the political spectrum kind of realm, and you're kind of trying to highlight that to say that means you can't talk about the political aspects of that, and I don't think that's what the top half of that quote is talking about. And the bottom half about the scenario planning is a description of what happens when we add implausible scenarios or scenarios under which we know nothing about. So it's an indictment of the know nothing kind of scenarios that Rumsfeld was throwing around as the example it gives at the bottom of the card. It doesn't say that there shouldn't be low probability scenarios or that scenario planning shouldn't be done. It says you shouldn't do scenario planning where you just make nonsense up and try to create links to them. So I think they're not making any of these arguments. These are kind of things why reading the full part of people's evidence is hard to do that in debates. But I think you need a little bit better cards to be making that argument if you want to get long-term viability out of that, because I think that evidence is more an indictment of, I think there are good Bible cards to indict the whole concept of extinction-based kind of dissent scenarios. I don't think this card really gets you there in the way that you want to get there. You're left with the dissent on there's uncertainty as to whether or not its uniqueness is the best thing that you've got going for it. And there's not an answer to the warming impacts on immigrants. You kind of underutilize in the 2NR the court's impact on immigrants. I don't know why you make it only about the warming stuff or why you didn't develop that aspect of turning the case or talk about how it is that it impacts on those things in different ways. I think you could also have used to bolster your theory arguments on the counterplan, the arguments, the solvency arguments that you've made about lack of enforcement, et cetera, on the case as arguments that they're fiating around with those, creating a rigged game for the affirmative notion that the counterplan fiats that red states pretend they're blue. They have Trump pretend he's a progressive as well, and Trump know why the game is rigged for the Aff if the negative doesn't get the counterplan. It seems like you could have used some of those solvency arguments instead of interacting with theory stuff going on. That's all I got there.
Just a question, time allocation wise. Is there 1AR, 2AR? Is there an impact we could have just not really extended and gone in more on one impact on the theory debate for the state's counterplan and then use that to like have a little bit more time to answer their stuff specifically? Just time allocations.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble is leaving the two disads for the bottom of the 1AR is problematic because you're kind of left with. You're fortunate that the farmer dissad didn't have a general impact, but had there been someone there, you were kind of in trouble.
I suspect you could have.
I don't know where to.
I think you could have saved time on case, kind of like been more aggressive about. They have a bunch of cards about the public option about why like it wouldn't solve the structure of healthcare markets. We don't care. We give money to undocumented immigrants, and that's what all of our managers are based off of. At that point, they kicked the CompTIA, which is like, that would be bad for you if they had the NDA alive, but like, it's no effect to it. So, and that I think is a lot of time.
I had one question. So you had suggested that you sort of agreed with them that they get to determine the interpretation of the plan text.
On the case debate?
Yeah. What arguments can we make to persuade you that the plan text does not justify the accuracy of extrapolation?
I kind of think in the places that mattered, I just kind of agree with them that it does. Like, they create a government public option. That's, I think, reasonably interpreted in the literature as like involving subsidies for people with low incomes, and like the cards they're reading about it say like the example in Mexico is like anyone pays the bottom 20% of income, so you don't pay anything, you don't pay premiums or whatever. And that I think is the like piece of their plan interpretation they're doing that like matters for the case. I just kind of think they're right. That was a reasonable extrapolation. I think the way you're explaining it about like the tax premium differences is like weird. I would just say there's some subsidies for people and they don't pay premiums, they don't make a lot of money. That seems to be both like more reasonable and also what your cards actually say and gets you to the place you want.
But it's kind of problematized by the spin is more that it becomes single payer and nobody pays rather than just the lower income kind of stuff, which, because your T interpretation was free for everybody, which, I mean, it seems like you're playing a little fast and loose with the notion that when our evidence said premiums, it meant pay taxes. I mean, I think you get away with, to some extent, interpreting what it is that the plan means. I think you need more arguments as to why here's, rather than just say, oh, the Republican Congress will interpret it however they want. I mean, why would the wording that is in the plan be interpreted in a way that's different? They're interpreting it. What is it about the way the plan's worded that creates some kind of possibility for a solvency argument or something? Just saying it's not in the plan isn't sufficient, I think, for making an argument out of that. And it seemed like you could have, once they spun what the plan meant, that magnified the links to your disads. I mean, you got what you wanted with them converting it into a single page, so I don't know what you were trying to get out of those arguments. It seemed that you, offensively, you get more from saying, oh, cool, you've reinterpreted your plan to be functionally single payer, so now all of our disads link maximal level, or here's how that stuff interacts with our arguments. But instead it was just, that wasn't in the plan, they shouldn't get to do it. It just isn't.
Do you think like
that
some of
compelling.
after that shift happened in the TSC, do you think some of the like single payer kind of case turning things would have been a better to
Yeah, but you need to make sure that you tie them to how does they impact on the immigrant,
Yeah.
on the undocumented population.
Okay.
Because that's what's missing from those arguments, because they were.
Yeah.
The other thing that you need to do on the ethic argument with the 1 to 10, the scenario that, I mean, this is more explicit than 2AR, so it's obviously harder to answer with the notion of that's the way 2AR characterizes that you value the immigrant, but you don't care what happens to the non-immigrant, that you want to make sure that your turns on the disad and your ethics arguments are you adopt a policy towards the immigrant that blows back on the immigrant in bad ways and it impacts on the other populations, that it's not just how does it affect the white people whose lives are great and the undocumented whose lives suck, it's how does it impact on both populations generally. That's a way that focus gets lost a little bit. It's more on the disad and less on the ethics part of the debate.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.